Marcus Hayes stood in the Seattle law office, watching his signature dry on the final page. The ink was black, permanent, and it severed 15 years in under 3 seconds. Jennifer sat across the mahogany table, her posture perfect, her expression carved from marble. She hadn't looked at him once since they entered the room. The attorney cleared his throat. "Marcus, I need to review the custody arrangement one more time for the record." Marcus's jaw tightened. He knew what was coming. He'd heard it in the preliminary hearings, seen it typed in the documents he'd read and reread until the words blurred together. Primary physical custody goes to Mrs. Hayes. The attorney's voice was clinical, scrubbed clean of any emotion. "Mr. Hayes will have visitation rights every other weekend, plus alternating holidays. This arrangement reflects the court's assessment that stability is paramount for the child's welfare." Stability. The word landed like a fist. Marcus forced his hands to remain flat on the table, forced his breathing to stay even. Jennifer's attorney had built an entire case on that single word. Exhibit A, Marcus's unemployment after leaving the Navy. Exhibit B, the 2-month gap when he'd stayed with a friend because he couldn't face an empty apartment. Exhibit C, the therapist's notes mentioning nightmares, hypervigilance, difficulty maintaining routines. They hadn't used the words post-traumatic stress disorder in court, but everyone knew. Everyone always knew. Jennifer finally looked at him. Her eyes held something worse than anger. They held pity mixed with resignation. "You're not present, Marcus. Even when you're in the room, you're somewhere else. You're back on that ship with David." The mention of David's name made the air thin. Marcus inhaled slowly, deliberately. David had been dead for 3 years, but the wound was fresh every morning. The feeling of his wrist slipping through Marcus's grip, the cold of the glove, the impossibility of holding on when the ocean wanted to take him. Jennifer stood. "The lawyer said you'll get the formal decree in 2 weeks. I'll have Lily ready for your first weekend on the 15th. She left without another word. The door closed with a soft click that echoed in Marcus's skull louder than any explosion he had ever diffused. He walked to his truck in the parking garage, each step measured and controlled. Control was all he had left. He sat behind the wheel and stared at the concrete pillar in front of him. Somewhere in this city, his 9-year-old daughter was going to sleep tonight, thinking her father didn't fight hard enough to keep their family together. The truth was worse. He'd fought and lost because the evidence was overwhelming. He was broken. 2 weeks crawled by. Marcus stayed in a motel near Tacoma, the kind with thin walls and permanent cooking smells. He filled out job applications he never submitted. He ran every morning until his legs screamed, trying to exhaust the part of his brain that replayed the accident in an endless loop. Nothing worked. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, forwarded from 3 previous addresses. Law offices of Patterson and Green, stamped in raised letters. Marcus opened it standing in the motel parking lot, his truck idling behind him. "Mr. Hayes, we regret to inform you of the passing of your grandfather, Robert Hayes, age 89. As executor of his estate, we must notify you that you are the sole beneficiary. The estate consists of a residential cabin in approximately 40 acres of land on Hayes Island in the San Juan Archipelago. However, there is a condition stipulated in the will. You must occupy the property for a minimum of 6 consecutive months, or the estate will be sold at public auction with proceeds donated to the Veterans Crisis Line." Marcus read it 3 times. Robert, the old man who'd served in Korea, who taught Marcus how to tie a bowline and read a compass. They'd seen each other maybe 5 times in the last 20 years. Marcus had been too busy with his career, and Robert had become a hermit on his island. The last time they spoke, Robert had said something that stuck. Sometimes a man needs to stand in one place long enough to figure out who he is. 6 months. Marcus looked at the date. He had until November to decide whether to claim the inheritance or let it go. If he didn't take it, he had nothing. No wooey job, no home, no plan for how to prove to a family court judge that he deserved more than every other weekend with his own daughter. The island was a lifeline he didn't deserve but couldn't refuse. 3 days later, Marcus stood on the car deck of the ferry, wind cutting through his jacket, as Seattle dissolved into a gray-green smudge on the horizon. He'd packed everything he owned into 2 duffel bags and a military footlocker. The rest, furniture, kitchen supplies, the life he'd built with Jennifer, Stayed behind in a storage unit he'd probably never open again. His phone buzzed, unknown number. Marcus answered. Mr. Hayes? The voice was smooth, confident, the kind that came from a lifetime of winning. This is Richard Caldwell. I hope this isn't a bad time. Marcus wedged the phone between his shoulder and ear, keeping his hands free to grip the rail as the ferry swayed. Who is this? Richard Caldwell. I'm a property developer here in the San Juans. I had several conversations with your grandfather over the years about his island. I'm very sorry for your loss. The practiced sympathy felt rehearsed. Marcus said nothing. I know you're on your way to see the property, Caldwell continued when the silence stretched too long. I wanted to reach out before you invest too much time or emotion. I'd like to make an offer. $800,000 cash, immediate closing. That's well above market value for undeveloped land in that location. Marcus watched the water churn past the ferry's hull. Why would you offer double the market value? Because I believe in fair deals and I respect what your grandfather built there. But let's be honest, you're a young man with a whole life ahead of you. 6 months in isolation on a rock with no power grid, no cell service, no hospital within an hour's boat ride. That's no life for someone in your position. The words someone in your position hung in the air like a threat. Marcus's grip on the rail tightened until his knuckles went white. How do you know about the 6-month requirement? I make it my business to understand property transactions in this region. Caldwell's tone shifted just slightly from friendly to transactional. Look, I'm offering you an easy out. Take the money. Start fresh somewhere with real opportunities. Your grandfather was old-fashioned. You don't have to make the same choices he did. Marcus stared at the mountains rising beyond the water, sharp, permanent, indifferent to human ambition. I haven't even seen the place yet. That's wise. See it. Then call me when you're ready to be practical. My number will be in your recent calls. Caldwell hung up without waiting for a response. Marcus lowered the phone slowly. $800,000. That kind of money could change everything. Lawyers, custody appeals, a fresh start. But the eagerness in Caldwell's voice, the way he'd known about the will's conditions, the emphasis on don't waste your time, all of it felt wrong. Why did a developer want a remote island badly enough to offer double its value before Marcus even set foot on it? The ferry docked at Friday Harbor. Marcus hired a smaller boat, a charter run by a weathered man named Tom, who didn't ask questions and didn't offer conversation. The ride took 40 minutes, cutting through cold water that reflected the low October sky. When the island finally appeared, it looked like something from a dream. Dense forest rising from rocky shores, a small wooden dock, and barely visible through the trees, the dark shape of a cabin. Tom helped him unload at the dock. You sure about this? The old landline works, but cell service is non-existent. I can come back tomorrow if you change your mind. Marcus shook his head. 2 weeks. Bring supplies then. Tom nodded and cast off. The sound of the engine faded, and then there was nothing but wind moving through the massive Douglas firs and the constant rhythm of waves on stone. Marcus shouldered his duffel bags and climbed the path. The cabin was exactly as he remembered from childhood visits. Weathered cedar gone silver gray, metal roof streaked with rust, surrounded by trees so old they'd seen generations come and go. He pushed open the door. Inside, everything was clean but sparse. A narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, a propane stove, a stone fireplace. Robert's presence filled every corner. The precision of the arranged supplies, the military corners on the wool blanket, the absence of anything unnecessary. Marcus unpacked with the same methodical care. Clothes in the small dresser, toiletries on the shelf, food supplies in the cupboard, everything in its place. Control, order, the armor against chaos. When the last item was stowed, he allowed himself to step onto the front porch. That's when he saw them. 2 rocking chairs, positioned side by side, angled slightly toward each other, facing the water. Both were made of the same weathered cedar as the cabin, worn smooth by decades of use. They sat in a configuration that spoke of ritual, not casual furniture placement, but something deliberate, sacred. Marcus ran his hand over the back of the nearest chair. The wood was cool, damp from the constant mist. He could picture Robert sitting here, but the second chair raised questions. His grandfather had lived alone for as long as Marcus could remember. Who had sat in that other chair? The answer mattered in a way Marcus couldn't articulate. These chairs weren't just furniture. They were a testament to something, friendship, loyalty, a connection so deep it had become part of the cabin's architecture. He felt like an intruder on a conversation that death had ended but not erased. That night, Marcus lay in Robert's narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the wind moved through the trees with a sound like breathing. The ocean's rhythm was constant, hypnotic, and wrong. Every wave that hit the rocks below carried the echo of other water, colder water, the black Pacific where David had disappeared. Sleep, when it came, brought the familiar nightmare. The deck of the fast response cutter. Ice rain, the capsized trawler, David's hand in his, then slipping, gone. Marcus woke gasping, the sheets twisted around him like burial shrouds. Gray dawn light filtered through the window. He forced himself up, made instant coffee with shaking hands, and stepped onto the porch to prove he could face the water. The strait was calm, almost glassy. Morning mist clung to the surface, and crossing it, moving with deliberate purpose, was a dog. Marcus froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips. The dog was a German shepherd, but not the black and tan he was used to seeing. This one was pale, silver gray and white, like fog given form. It was large but moved with the careful gait of an old animal. It crossed the exposed sandbar that connected Marcus's island to the larger inhabited island half a mile away, its paws sinking slightly into wet sand. Marcus waited for a person to follow. Dogs didn't cross straits alone. No one came. The shepherd reached his island, climbed the rocky beach, and disappeared up the path toward the cabin. Marcus heard the soft click of claws on wood, then nothing. He moved to the door and looked out through the screen. The dog had walked past the cabin entrance entirely. It stood beside the second rocking chair, the one Marcus didn't use, and after a long moment lay down. It positioned itself with practiced precision, body aligned with the chair's runners, head up, gaze directed out to sea. Marcus stood frozen behind the screen. The dog didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge his presence. This wasn't a lost pet seeking help. This was something else entirely. He watched for 20 minutes. The dog never moved except for the slow rise and fall of breathing. It stared at the horizon as if waiting for something only it could see by mom. Finally, Marcus stepped outside. The dog's ears twitched, but it didn't turn its head. "This is private property," Marcus said, his voice rough from disuse. The dog remained motionless. Not afraid, not aggressive, simply indifferent. Marcus tried again, more firmly. "You can't stay here." The dog let out a long, quiet sigh and rested its muzzle on its paws. The message was clear. This was not up for negotiation. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, not anger, but recognition. He'd seen this before in military working dogs, in soldiers on watch. This wasn't casual behavior. This was discipline. This was a mission being executed with absolute commitment. The dog was standing guard. Over what? Over whom? The question gnawed at Marcus all morning. He tried to work, repairing a loose shutter, checking the water pump, but his attention kept drifting to the porch where the mod maintained its vigil. Around noon, Marcus checked his watch and looked at the water. The tide had turned. The sandbar that had been exposed at dawn was now covered, the strait a continuous sheet of gray-green. As if sensing the change, the dog stirred. It rose stiffly, stretched, and gave one last long look at the empty chair. Then it walked down the path without a backward glance at Marcus. He followed at a distance, watching as the dog reached the water's edge. The sandbar was submerged, but the dog knew exactly where it lay beneath the surface. It waded in until the water reached its chest, then swam the deeper middle section with strong, economical strokes. It climbed out on the far shore and disappeared into the trees. Marcus stood at his own shoreline, trying to make sense of what he'd witnessed. This wasn't random. The dog had come at low tide, stayed for hours, and left when the tide made passage difficult. This was routine. Back in the cabin, Marcus pulled open the drawers of Robert's desk, searching for answers. He found nautical charts, old fishing licenses, receipts for supplies. In the bottom drawer, beneath a folded oilskin map, he found a wooden box. Inside were photographs. Most showed Robert at various ages, young in Navy uniform, middle-aged beside a truck, older with white hair and weathered face. But near the bottom of the stack, Marcus found one that stopped him cold. The photograph showed the porch, the two rocking chairs, and in them, two men. Robert sat in the chair closest to the cabin door, looking younger than Marcus remembered. Maybe late 60s, hair still more pepper than salt. He was laughing, his face split by a wide, genuine grin. In the second chair sat another man, barrel-chested with a thick white mustache and eyes that crinkled at the corners. He held a pipe in one hand, the other resting on his knee. He was smiling too, caught mid-conversation, radiating contentment. Marcus turned the photo over, written in Robert's looping handwriting. Robert and Thomas, 1999. Guardians of the secret. Guardians of the secret. Marcus stared at the words until they blurred. What secret? Who was Thomas? And why had Robert never mentioned him? He looked at the photograph again, studying the easy intimacy between the two men. This wasn't posed. This was captured reality. Two people who sat together so often that being photographed together felt natural. The chairs weren't just furniture. They were thrones, watch posts, confessional booths. They were where Robert and Thomas had built something that outlasted everything else. And now Thomas's chair sat empty while his dog returned every day to keep watch. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. That wasn't a stray. That was Thomas's dog, still showing up for a meeting that would never happen again. Marcus sat heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, the photograph trembling in his hands. He understood now what he was witnessing on the porch. It wasn't confusion or stubbornness. It was loyalty so absolute that death couldn't break it. The dog knew Thomas was gone, but duty transcended knowledge. The watch continued because the watch was everything. Marcus looked at his own hands, steady, strong, capable of disarming complex explosives, but unable to hold on to his friend when it mattered. David's voice echoed in his memory, not from the nightmare, but from better times. You good, man? No, he wasn't good. He'd failed David, failed Jennifer, failed Lily. He'd failed everyone who ever counted on him. But this dog, this ancient soldier with the gray fur and stiff joints, hadn't failed anyone. It kept showing up. It maintained the ritual. It honored the bond even when one half of it was gone forever. Marcus placed the photograph on the table and pressed his palms against his eyes. The weight of other people's loyalty made his own failings unbearable. On the fourth day, Marcus was splitting wood when he heard an engine. He looked up to see a battered pickup truck rattling down the path that barely qualified as a road. This island was private property. No one should be here. His hand moved instinctively to his hip, where nothing had hung for 3 years. The truck stopped and a man climbed out. He was in his late 60s, broad-shouldered despite his age, with a white beard and carpenter's hands. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, and his eyes held the particular kindness of someone who'd seen enough of life to stop judging it. You must be Marcus, the man said, his voice gravelly but warm. I'm Frank Morrison. Knew your grandfather for 40 years. He paused, then added, I'm sorry for your loss. Robert was a good man. Marcus set down the axe carefully, keeping his body between Frank and the cabin. How did you know I'd be here? Frank smiled, not offended by the suspicion. Small islands, small communities. Word travels. Besides, Robert told me before he died that if anything happened, I should make sure his grandson got this. He reached into the truck bed and pulled out a heavy toolbox. Left it at my workshop. Said you'd need it. Marcus recognized this toolbox immediately. Army green, dented, with Robert's name stenciled on the side in white paint. He'd seen it 100 times during childhood visits. Robert had built half the cabin with those tools. Frank carried it to the porch and set it down gently. Can I sit? 5 minutes. Then I'll leave you in peace. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. Frank settled into Robert's rocking chair, the one Marcus had been avoiding, and looked out at the water with the expression of someone coming home. Robert and I go way back. Vietnam era, different branches but same war. When he bought this place in '75, I helped him build it. Every board, every nail. Marcus leaned against the porch rail. He was alone? Frank's expression shifted, became more complex. Not always. There was Thomas, the name from the photograph. Marcus's attention sharpened. Who was Thomas? Thomas Barrett, owned the neighboring island, the one across the strait. He and Robert. Frank paused, choosing words carefully. They became friends in the 70s. Best friends I ever saw between two men. For 30 years, one of them crossed that sandbar every single day to sit with the other. Didn't matter if it was raining, snowing, blowing 50-knot winds. They'd be out here on this porch, talking about everything and nothing. Marcus thought about the worn, smooth arms of the chairs, the intimate angle of their positioning. What did they talk about? Frank smiled. Life, the war, history, and toward the end, the island's secrets. That word again, secrets. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. What secrets? Frank's smile faded. He looked uncomfortable, like a man who'd said more than he intended. There's things about this place Robert never told most people. History that goes back further than the deeds and titles. He said when the time was right, family would know. That's not an answer. No, Frank agreed, it's not. He met Marcus's eyes. Have you had a visitor from Richard Caldwell yet? The shift in topic felt deliberate, but Marcus played along. He called. Wants to buy the island. Frank's weathered face hardened. Don't sell to that man. Don't even talk to him. He's been circling these islands for years like a vulture. Wants to turn the whole archipelago into luxury resorts, marinas, condos. Everything our generation fought to prevent. Why does he want this place so badly? Robert and Thomas spent decades protecting it. That's why. Frank stopped abruptly, as if he'd almost revealed something he'd promised to keep secret. He stood. Just don't sell, and be careful. Caldwell plays dirty, very dirty. Frank walked to his truck, then paused with his hand on the door. That dog you've been seeing, that's Gunner. He was Thomas's. When Thomas died 3 months ago, Hart just gave out. His granddaughter Elena tried to keep Gunner home. But the dog won't stay. Makes the trip every day, waiting. Marcus looked at the empty chair. Every day, every single day. Frank's voice carried profound sadness. Thomas didn't even last 3 months after Robert passed. Broken heart, the doctor said, though they called it other things. He drove away, leaving Marcus alone with new knowledge that raised more questions than it answered. That evening, as Marcus watched the sunset over the strait, he heard the now familiar sound of a boat engine. This one was different, powerful, expensive. A sleek cabin cruiser appeared, white fiberglass gleaming, and pulled up to Marcus's modest dock. 2 people disembarked. The man was in his mid-50s, wearing clothes that screamed money. Expensive casual wear that looked effortless, but cost more than most people's monthly rent. His hair was silver at the temples, his face tanned and confident. Everything about him radiated success and entitlement. The woman with him was younger, maybe early 40s, dressed in a sharp business suit that seemed absurd on a remote island. She carried a leather briefcase and moved with the precise efficiency of someone who billed by the hour. Marcus met them at the dock, not bothering to hide his displeasure. Private property. The man smiled, extending his hand as if they were old friends meeting at a country club. Richard Caldwell. We spoke on the phone. This is Victoria Simmons, my attorney. I hope you don't mind us dropping by. I wanted to see the property again and meet you in person. Marcus didn't take the offered hand. Interesting timing. I just got here 6 days ago. Caldwell's smile didn't waver. Like I said, I make it my business to know what's happening in my region. Beautiful place you've got here. I can see why your grandfather loved it. He gestured at the cabin, the forest, the view, as if he owned it already. Victoria stepped forward, all business. Mr. Hayes, I'll be direct. We've done extensive research on the property history. There are some concerns about the title. Marcus kept his expression neutral. What kind of concerns? The original land grant dates back to 1885. The records show it was awarded to the Barrett family, Thomas Barrett's ancestors, by the territorial government. Your grandfather's purchase in 1975 may have issues with the title transfer. The documentation is incomplete. That's impossible. He owned it for 50 years. Victoria opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Adverse possession laws are complex, Mr. Hayes. If we can prove the original transfer was legally flawed, the property could revert to Barrett heirs or, more likely, become state lands subject to public auction. Caldwell jumped in, his tone sympathetic. Look, Marcus, Can I call you Marcus? This could get ugly. Years of litigation, tens of thousands in legal fees. And even if you win, what have you won? 6 months alone on a rock with no future? He pulled out a business card and a folded paper. I'm revising my offer. 600,000 cash, closing next week. You walk away clean, no legal entanglements, and you can build a real life somewhere that matters. Marcus looked at the paper without taking it. The amount had dropped 200,000 since the phone call. That's interesting. 3 days ago, you offered 800,000. Now you're at 6. What changed? Caldwell's mask slipped for just a second. A flash of irritation quickly smoothed over. The title complications reduced the property's value. I'm actually doing you a favor by offering anything at all given the circumstances. Marcus met his eyes. Get off my island. Victoria's professional veneer cracked slightly. Mr. Hayes, you should understand. I understand you're trespassing. Marcus's voice was quiet but carried an edge that made Victoria take a step back. You've got 30 seconds before I call the county sheriff. Caldwell's friendly expression vanished completely, replaced by something cold and calculating. You're making a mistake. You think you can fight me? I've been buying properties in these islands for 20 years. I have lawyers, resources, connections. You're a washed-up veteran with PTSD and a divorce settlement bleeding you dry. His eyes glittered. Oh yes, I did my homework. I know about your daughter too. Weekend custody. How's that going to work from here? Marcus's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his voice level. 29 seconds. Caldwell turned to leave, Victoria hurrying after him. Over his shoulder, he called back, You've got 6 months to prove ownership, Mr. Hayes. Tick-tock. The engine roared to life and the cruiser pulled away, leaving Marcus standing on the dock with rage burning in his chest. How did Caldwell know about Lily? How much digging had he done? More importantly, why did he want this island badly enough to threaten a veteran with custody problems and legal warfare? The next morning, Marcus crossed to the main island for supplies. He needed food, kerosene, and answers. The town of Friday Harbor was a single main street with a post office, a few restaurants, and one general store called the Island Mercantile. A cheerful bell announced his entrance. The woman behind the counter looked up and smiled immediately. You must be Robert's grandson. I'm Claire. She was maybe late 50s, with red curly hair going silver, and the kind of face that had smiled so much it had carved permanent laugh lines. Marcus grabbed a wire basket and started loading supplies. Word travels fast. Honey, on an island this size, word doesn't travel, it teleports. Claire leaned on the counter, watching him with open curiosity. How are you settling in? Fine. Marcus focused on reading labels he didn't care about, trying to avoid conversation. Let me guess, Caldwell's already paid you a visit. Marcus's head snapped up. How did you know? Because he's a shark, and you're fresh blood in the water. Claire's friendly expression had hardened. Richard Caldwell has been trying to buy up every piece of property in the San Juans for the last 20 years. Wants to build his Pacific Northwest luxury resort vision. Makes me sick. An older couple near the coffee display nodded agreement. The man spoke up. He tried the same thing with my property. Claimed there was some easement from 1890 that gave him access rights. Tied me up in court for 2 years. His wife added, cost us $30,000 in legal fees before his case fell apart. But that's what he does. Finds vulnerable people and crushes them with lawyers until they give up. A younger man in fishing gear joined the conversation. Man's been buying up properties one by one. Half the old families have sold out because they couldn't afford to fight him. Claire pointed at Marcus. Your grandfather fought him off 3 times. Robert and Thomas both. That's why Caldwell hated them. She lowered her voice, leaning forward conspiratorially. Robert and Thomas found something years ago, some kind of proof about the island's history. Robert told me it would shut Caldwell up for good if things ever went too far. Marcus's pulse quickened. What kind of proof? Don't know. They were secretive about it. But Thomas told me once, the island keeps its secrets. When it's ready, it'll reveal them. Claire rang up his supplies. Whatever they found, it must be important. Important enough that Robert hid it, and Caldwell's desperate to make sure it stays hidden. Marcus paid and left, his mind spinning. The photograph's caption echoed in his head. Guardians of the secret. Robert and Thomas hadn't just been friends sitting on a porch. They'd been protecting something. Something that threatened Caldwell's plans badly enough that he was willing to play dirty to get the island before Marcus could find it. Back at the cabin, Marcus couldn't sleep. He pulled out the toolbox Frank had delivered, examining it more carefully. It was exactly as he remembered. Scarred metal, compartments for different tools, Robert's methodical organization. But something felt off about the weight. Marcus removed the top tray. The bottom seemed too shallow. He pressed along the edges and heard a soft click. A false bottom. Inside the hidden compartment lay a leather journal. Marcus's hands trembled as he lifted it out. The cover was worn smooth, the pages yellowed. He opened it carefully. Robert's handwriting filled the pages. Neat, precise, military in its discipline. The entries dated back to 1975. Marcus flipped to the most recent entry, dated 2 weeks before Robert's death. If Marcus is reading this, it means I'm gone and Caldwell is making his move. I knew it would come to this. Thomas and I have kept the secret for 50 years. But now it's time. The island chose us as guardians. Now it's chosen you, Marcus. The map is in the place where two friends sit and watch the tide, where Thomas waits still. The proof you need is where the sun sets on the longest day, the old lighthouse foundation, North Point. Don't let Caldwell win. This island is more than property. It's history. It's sacred ground. And it's yours by right older than any deed. Trust Gunner. He knows more than you think. He and Thomas found it together. Robert Marcus read the entry 3 times, his heart pounding, a map, hidden in the chairs, proof at a lighthouse foundation. This wasn't paranoid rambling. Robert had been lucid until the end. He'd hidden something deliberately and left instructions only family would find. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and went to the porch. He examined the rocking chairs carefully, running his hands over every surface. The wood was worn smooth, no obvious hiding places. Then he noticed the left armrest of the second chair, Thomas's chair, had a slightly different wear pattern. The wood there was polished to a deeper sheen, as if someone had rested their hand there for years while working something loose. Marcus pressed hard along the seam where the arm met the chair's back. Something clicked. A hidden compartment in the hollow arm popped open. Inside, rolled tight, was a piece of aged parchment. Marcus carried it inside and spread it carefully on the table. It was a hand-drawn map of the island, dated 1892. The cartography was precise, showing property boundaries, shorelines, and topographical features. But what caught Marcus's attention was a location marked on the northern point of the island. A symbol had been drawn there, a lighthouse. In the margin, written in faded ink, Barrett Family Trust, Original Survey 1892. Barrett family, Thomas's ancestors, the original owners. But if the Barretts had owned it originally, and Robert had bought it from them in 1975, then the title was legitimate unless something else was hidden at the lighthouse ruins, unless the proof Robert mentioned wasn't about ownership, but about something that made ownership irrelevant. Marcus studied the map until dawn. The North Point was accessible, but would require a difficult hike through dense forest. Robert's journal mentioned where the sun sets on the longest day. Summer solstice, months away. Or did it mean something else? The angle where the sun would set during solstice. He was so focused on the map he didn't hear the boat until its engine cut off at the dock. Marcus looked out the window and froze. Jennifer's boat. And with her, climbing onto the dock with a backpack almost as big as she was Lily. Marcus's heart seized. This wasn't his weekend. Something was wrong. He met them at the path. Jennifer's face was tight, her jaw set in that way that meant she was holding back anger or tears or both. Lily stood beside her, trying to look brave but clearly uncertain. She wanted to see where you're living. Jennifer's voice was clipped. I thought she should see what 6 months here really means. The subtext was clear. I'm showing her how unsuitable this is so she'll understand why you can't be a real father. Lily looked up at Marcus, her brown eyes, his eyes, searching his face. Hi, Dad. The word Dad nearly undid him. Hey, baby. Jennifer handed him a small duffel bag. I'll pick her up Sunday evening. Try not to disappoint her. She climbed back into the boat without waiting for a response. Marcus and Lily watched the boat pull away. When the engine's sound faded, Lily turned to him. Mom thinks this place is dangerous and lonely and bad for you. Her voice was small. Is it? Marcus knelt so they were eye to eye. What do you think? Lily looked around at the towering trees, the cabin nestled among them, the wide strait stretching to distant mountains. I think it's beautiful. She met his gaze. But are you okay here, Dad? Really? The question pierced him. Lily was 9 years old and she could see through every defense he'd built. He wanted to lie, to say everything was fine, but something about this place, this moment, demanded truth. I'm trying to be okay. It's hard. But being here, maybe it's helping. Lily took his hand. I'm glad I'm here with you. They walked up to the cabin together. Lily explored every corner, fascinated by the simplicity, asking questions about the propane stove, the fireplace, the view from every window. Her enthusiasm was infectious. Marcus found himself seeing the place through her eyes, not as a prison of isolation, but as an adventure. When she discovered the two rocking chairs, she stopped. Dad, why are there two chairs but you're alone? Marcus pulled out the photograph and showed her. This was your great-grandfather, Robert, and his friend Thomas. They sat here together every day for 30 years. Lily touched the empty chair reverently. That's sad, but also beautiful. She looked at him with sudden intensity. Do you have friends like that? The question hit harder than she could know. I had one. His name was David. What happened to him? He died. 3 years ago, I was supposed to save him and I couldn't. Lily was quiet for a moment, then said, Is that why you have nightmares? Marcus stared at her. Your mom told you about those? I heard her talking to Grandma. About David. About you being sad. Lily's eyes were too wise for 9 years. I'm sorry he died, Dad. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Then they heard it, the soft click of claws on wood. Lily gasped. Dad, there's a dog. Before Marcus could explain, Lily was off the porch and approaching slowly, hand extended. The Montapom, Gunner, Marcus knew now, had arrived for his afternoon watch. For the first time since Marcus had witnessed the ritual, Gunner turned his head away from the horizon. He looked at Lily. His tail thumped once against the porch boards. Lily sat down on the floor next to him, moving with instinctive gentleness. Hi, I'm Lily. What's your name? Gunner, Marcus said quietly. He was Thomas's dog, the man in the picture with Robert. Lily stroked Gunner's head carefully. He's waiting for someone, isn't he? How did you know? I can tell. He's loyal. Like you, Dad. The words settled over Marcus like a benediction he didn't deserve. Gunner, who had barely acknowledged Marcus's existence for nearly a week, lay his head down where Lily could reach him more easily. She petted him gently, talking to him in a low, soothing voice about the island, the trees, the water. Marcus watched his daughter connect with a grieving dog and felt something crack open in his chest. Not pain, but the possibility of healing. That evening, after Lily was asleep on the narrow bed and Marcus had made himself a pallet on the floor, he lay awake thinking about everything. The map, the journal, Caldwell's threats, the proof hidden somewhere on the North Point. He'd planned to search for it alone, but now Lily was here. He couldn't leave her, but he couldn't take her into potentially dangerous terrain either. Sleep finally came, restless and shallow. When Marcus woke, morning light was filtering through the windows and Lily was already up, sitting at the table studying something. Dad, she said without looking up, you should see this. Marcus joined her. She'd found the map. He'd left it on the table, too exhausted to hide it. Lily was examining it with intense focus. This handwriting is beautiful. Like calligraphy. She traced her finger over the date. That's super old. Like when great-great-grandpa was alive? Maybe older. Lily pointed to the lighthouse symbol. Why is this different? Marcus looked closer. The symbol had tiny letters inside that he'd missed in last night's dim light. SS, what does SS mean, Dad? I don't know. Lily's face lit up with sudden understanding. Wait, I learned this in school. SS could be summer solstice. That's the longest day. Marcus stared at his daughter. The journal had said longest day, and he'd assumed it meant the date. But Lily was right and wrong. You're brilliant, but solstice is in June, months away. Lily frowned, thinking hard. She walked to the window and looked at the sun's position. Or, what if it means where the sun sets on solstice? Not when, but where. The logic clicked into place. Summer solstice sunset would be at a specific angle, northwest. The North Point faced northwest. The symbol wasn't telling them when to search. It was telling them where to look based on solar positioning. Lily, you just cracked a 50-year-old code. She beamed, then grew serious. Can I come with you? Please, I promise I'll be careful. And her voice cracked slightly. I don't get much time with you anymore. Marcus's carefully constructed defenses crumbled. She was right. Jennifer had limited his time with Lily to every other weekend, 48 hours every 2 weeks. That was it. That was all he had to be her father. And she'd just proven she was smart, observant, and brave enough to handle this. Okay, but you stay close to me, always. They spent the morning preparing. Marcus packed a backpack with supplies, rope, flashlight, water, granola bars, first aid kit. He showed Lily how to read the map, how to follow terrain features. She absorbed everything with fierce concentration. Around noon, as they were doing final preparations, Gunnar appeared at the porch. But instead of going to his usual chair, he stood at the edge, looking toward the north. He whined once, a low questioning sound, then looked back at Marcus and Lily. Lily grabbed Marcus's arm. Dad, I think he wants to come with us. He never leaves his post early. Gunnar whined again, more insistent. He took several steps toward the path leading north, then looked back. Lily pulled out the journal and read aloud. Trust Gunnar. He knows more than you think. She looked at her father. What if he's been waiting to show someone? What if we're finally the right people? Marcus studied the old dog, then the path disappearing into dense forest, then the sky, where dark clouds were building on the western horizon. The weather was turning. They had maybe 4 hours before a storm hit. Caldwell was filing his legal claim Monday, 2 days away. Time was running out on multiple fronts. But Lily was looking at him with absolute trust. Gunnar was waiting with ancient patience, and somewhere on the North Point was proof that could save this island from Caldwell's ambitions. Marcus shouldered the pack and took Lily's hand. All right, old soldier. Lead the way. Gunnar's tail wagged, the first real wag Marcus had seen. The dog turned and headed up the path toward the North Point, moving with renewed purpose. Marcus and Lily followed, 2 people and a loyal dog walking into the forest while storm clouds gathered and time ran short. The island was about to reveal its secrets, and Marcus, broken veteran and part-time father, was about to discover that sometimes the strongest anchors aren't made of iron. They're made of loyalty, purpose, and a 9-year-old girl who believed he could still be a hero. The path into the forest swallowed them whole. Douglas firs towered overhead, their trunks wider than Marcus could wrap his arms around, their canopy blocking most of the sky. The understory was thick with sword ferns and salal, creating walls of green on either side of the barely visible trail. Gunnar moved ahead with confidence, his gray form weaving between obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Lily's hand stayed locked in Marcus's as they climbed over a massive fallen cedar, its bark soft with rot. Her breathing came heavier, but she didn't complain. Marcus found himself teaching without thinking, pointing out the distinctive pattern of deer tracks in soft earth, the high nest of a bald eagle visible through a gap in the canopy, the mudslide marks where river otters traveled from forest to water. This is where they hunt, he explained, indicating fresh scratches on a tree trunk. Black bear, probably a yearling based on the height. Lily's eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. Are we safe? Bears don't want trouble with humans. Make noise, they'll avoid us. He squeezed her hand, but stay close anyway. They walked in comfortable silence after that, letting their footsteps and occasional conversations serve as warning to any wildlife. The forest was ancient, untouched by logging that had stripped so much of the Pacific Northwest. Some of these trees had been saplings when the Civil War ended. They'd witnessed everything: storms, droughts, the slow, patient work of time. After an hour, Lily asked for a water break. They sat on a moss-covered boulder while Gunnar paced nearby, clearly eager to continue. Marcus pulled out granola bars and passed one to his daughter. Mom says you have nightmares about your friend David. Marcus's hand paused halfway to his mouth. Jennifer had told her more than he'd realized. Lily watched him with those 2 perceptive eyes, waiting. I do. Will you tell me what happened? The question hung between them. Marcus had spent 3 years avoiding this conversation with everyone, therapists, friends, Jennifer. But here, in this ancient forest with his daughter looking at him with complete trust, the words came. We were on a rescue mission. A boat had capsized in a storm. David and I were trying to save the crew. There was equipment failure. Something broke that shouldn't have broken. David went overboard. I caught him, held his wrist, but the glove was wet and he was heavy, and the ocean wanted him more than I could hold on. Marcus's throat tightened. He slipped. I lost him. Lily absorbed this, her small face serious. It wasn't your fault. The simple declaration hit him harder than 3 years of therapy. I was supposed to save him. That it was my job. But you tried. She took his hand. Trying counts, Dad, even when it doesn't work. Marcus looked at his 9-year-old daughter and saw a wisdom that shouldn't exist in someone so young. Maybe this was what happened when parents divorced. Children grew up too fast, learned too soon that adults were fallible, and the world didn't guarantee happy endings. I'm glad you're here with me, he said quietly. Lily squeezed his hand. Me too. Gunnar barked once, sharp and impatient. The message was clear. Time to move. They pressed on. The terrain grew steeper, rockier. Massive boulders appeared, deposited by ancient glaciers and now wearing coats of thick moss. The air changed, grew thinner, sharper, carrying the salt tang of open water. They were approaching the northern point where land met sea without buffer or compromise. 2 hours after leaving the cabin, the forest opened abruptly. Marcus stopped, pulling Lily close. Ahead lay a rocky promontory jutting into the strait like an accusing finger. The view was staggering, water stretching to the Canadian islands, the Olympic mountains rising beyond in jagged, snow-capped peaks. Wind hit them immediately, stronger here without tree cover. But there was no lighthouse. Lily's disappointment was audible. Where is it? Marcus scanned the area carefully, using skills honed over 20 years of looking for things designed not to be found. The ground here was covered in low vegetation, stunted trees bent by constant wind and scattered rocks. Then he saw it, a formation too regular to be natural. Stones arranged in a rough square, mostly buried under blackberry brambles and grass. Foundation. The lighthouse was here but demolished decades ago. Gunnar trotted directly to the stones and began pawing at a specific spot, his claws scraping against rock. He barked urgently, the sound whipped away by wind. Marcus knelt beside the dog, Lily crowding close. He cleared vegetation with his hands, feeling along the stones. Most were mortared together, solid, but one was different, larger, flatter, sitting slightly raised. Carved into its weathered surface was a symbol, the same lighthouse from the map. This is it. Help me. Together they pulled at the surrounding vegetation. Marcus used his knife to cut through stubborn blackberry vines, earning scratches despite his care. Lily dug with her hands, fearless. After 10 minutes, they'd exposed the entire capstone. Marcus wedged his fingers into the gap and pulled. The stone resisted, heavy and stubborn. He adjusted his grip, braced his feet, and heaved with everything he had. The stone shifted, ground against its neighbors with a deep grinding sound, and finally slid aside. Beneath lay a cavity carved into the foundation itself. Inside sat a metal box about the size of a tackle box, its surface corroded but intact. An old brass padlock secured the lid. Marcus lifted it out carefully. The weight suggested substantial contents. He examined the lock, rusted but holding. No key. He could pick it with the right tools, but he'd left those in the cabin. Instead, he pulled a heavy rock from the foundation and brought it down hard on the lock shackle. 3 strikes and the corroded metal snapped. Marcus opened the box. Inside, wrapped in layers of waxed cloth that had protected them from moisture, were documents. He lifted them out one by one, hands trembling. The first was an official survey map dated 1892, showing the island's boundaries with the territorial seal stamped in faded red ink. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind used for permanent records. Next came a deed, Barrett family to Robert Hayes, 1975. Every signature was present, every witness documented, every legal requirement met. This wasn't the problem document Victoria Simmons had claimed existed. This was ironclad. But beneath these lay something more interesting. Letters. Multiple pieces of correspondence between the territorial governor and someone named James Barrett, dated between 1885 and 1892. Marcus read quickly, his pulse accelerating with each line. The letters discussed the island's significance as a Native American settlement site, archaeological evidence of long-term habitation, seasonal fishing camps, sacred ceremonial grounds. The territorial government had designated it protected, prohibited from development. Photographs came next, brittle with age. They showed the island in the 1880s with visible structures, traditional longhouses, drying racks for fish, canoes pulled up on the beach. This wasn't empty land when the white settlers arrived. It was home. At the bottom of the box lay a modern document, relatively recent. Marcus unfolded it and his breath caught. It was a letter from the Washington State Historical Society, dated 2015, officially certifying the island as a protected heritage site under state and federal preservation laws. Development of any kind would require approval from multiple state agencies, approval that would never be granted given the archaeological and cultural significance. Dad, what does it mean? Lily's voice was small, awed by the solemnity of the moment. It means Caldwell can never build here. Ever. No matter who owns the island, it can't be developed. These documents prove it. Then why hide them? Marcus found a note tucked behind the Historical Society letter. Robert's handwriting, shaky but legible. Thomas and I discovered this in county archives in 1998. Someone had filed it wrong deliberately. We suspect Caldwell's father bribed a clerk to bury it. If we went public, Caldwell would tie us up in courts for decades, make our lives hell. So we kept it hidden, kept him guessing. As long as one of us was alive on the island, he couldn't move forward. Now that burden passes to you, Marcus. Use it wisely. Just when you're ready to end this forever. Marcus sat back on his heels, overwhelmed. Robert and Thomas had been guardians in the truest sense, protecting not just property, but history, culture, the truth itself. They'd spent 30 years sitting on that porch, keeping watch, making sure Caldwell never gained the foothold he needed. We have to get this to the county office, tomorrow before Caldwell files his claim. Lily touched his arm, her expression suddenly frightened. Dad, the sky. Marcus looked up. While they'd been excavating, the clouds he'd noticed earlier had built into something threatening. The western horizon was a bruised purple-black, and the wind had picked up significantly. The air felt wrong, too warm, too heavy, carrying the electrical charge of a major storm. We need to move. Now. Marcus carefully placed everything back in the metal box and secured it in his backpack. Gunnar was already moving toward the path, barking urgently. They ran. The first drops hit as they entered the forest. Not gentle rain, but immediate downpour. Within seconds, Marcus's jacket was soaked through. Lily's hair plastered to her skull. The path, barely visible in good conditions, became treacherous. Mud formed instantly on the trail, slick and grabbing. Stay with me. Marcus kept Lily's hand locked in his, practically dragging her over obstacles. Gunnar stayed just ahead, visible only as a gray shadow in the suddenly dark forest. Lightning split the sky, so bright it left after images. Thunder followed immediately, a physical percussion that Marcus felt in his bones. The sound triggered something in his hindbrain, not quite memory, but the shadow of it. Artillery, explosions. The chaos before everything went wrong, not now. He forced the thoughts down. Lily needs you present. They were halfway back when a massive hemlock branch, loosened by wind and rain, crashed down directly across their path. The impact sprayed mud and debris. The branch was enormous, 3 feet thick, impossible to climb with a 9-year-old. Detour. Gunnar was already moving, leading them off the main trail onto a fainter path Marcus hadn't noticed on the way up. It added distance but offered passage. 20 minutes. That's all the detour cost, but it might as well have been hours. When they finally burst from the forest into the clearing around the cabin, all three were gasping. The strait had transformed from a body of water into a churning cauldron of whitecaps and spray. Waves crashed against the rocky shore with enough force to send foam flying 30 feet in the air. Inside, Marcus shoved the door open against the wind. They tumbled in, soaked and shaking. He slammed the door behind them and threw the deadbolt. The cabin felt suddenly too small, the walls too thin against the storm's assault. Wind screamed through gaps in the construction, a high, keening sound that set Marcus's teeth on edge. Rain hammered the metal roof like gravel being poured from the sky. Lily was shivering violently. Marcus moved fast, stripping her wet clothes and wrapping her in dry blankets from the trunk. He built a fire with hands that shook from adrenaline, not cold. The kindling caught on the first match. Small mercy. Come here. He pulled Lily close to the flames. The heat was immediate and fierce. Color began returning to her face. That was scary, she admitted, teeth chattering. You were incredibly brave. Gunnar shook water from his coat in a dramatic spray, then settled on the floor near them. His eyes were alert, watching the windows where the storm raged. Marcus checked his watch, 4 in the afternoon, but the sky was dark as dusk. He looked out at the strait and his stomach dropped. The sandbar they'd crossed that morning was gone, not just submerged, but obliterated by storm surge and high tide. The water between his island and the main island was a violent channel of churning gray. They were trapped. No way off until the storm passed. Lily followed his gaze. We're stuck here. For now, but we're safe. We have food, fire, shelter. And he patted the backpack containing the documents. We have what we need. Lily nodded, but fear still showed in her eyes. The storm sounds were overwhelming. The roar of wind, the percussion of rain, the periodic boom of thunder that made the cabin shudder. Marcus made hot chocolate from his supplies, the mundane task grounding him. They sat together on the floor in front of the fire, Lily wrapped in blankets, Marcus still damp but warming. Gunnar lay between them and the door, positioned as if he expected trouble. The hours dragged. The storm intensified rather than passing. By 6, full darkness had fallen and the cabin's single electric bulb flickered ominously. Marcus lit the kerosene lamps, adding their warm glow to the firelight. Lily's eyes grew heavy. The exhaustion of the hike, the terror of the storm, and the warmth of the fire all conspired to pull her towards sleep. Rest, he told her. I'll keep watch. You promise? I promise. She curled up on the narrow bed, still wrapped in blankets. Within minutes, her breathing deepened. Marcus stayed on the floor, back against the wall, staring into the fire and listening to the storm destroy his grandfather's island. The phone rang. The sound was so unexpected, so alien in the storm's chaos, that Marcus jumped. The old rotary phone on the wall. He'd forgotten it existed. He crossed the room and lifted the receiver. Please, is this Marcus? The voice was female, high with panic, words tumbling over each other. He didn't recognize it. Who is this? Elena Barrett, Thomas's granddaughter. Frank gave me your number. I need help, please. Marcus's grip tightened on the receiver. What's wrong? Caldwell's men came to my workshop. 2 of them. They're tearing everything apart, saying grandfather had stolen documents that belonged to Caldwell Properties. They're destroying everything, his tools, my sculptures, his papers. I tried to stop them, and they shoved me. I called the police, but they can't get here in the storm. Marcus's blood pressure spiked. Where are you right now? Locked in my bathroom. They're still out there searching. I can hear them. Her voice broke. I'm scared. Marcus looked at Lily sleeping by the fire, then at the windows where rain lashed in horizontal sheets. The strait between him and the main island was impassable. The storm was still building. Going out in this would be suicide. Elena, I can't reach you in this storm. The sandbar's underwater. I know, I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to call. Frank's visiting family on the mainland. I'm alone. She was crying now. They're destroying everything grandfather left me. Listen to me carefully. Stay locked in that bathroom. Do not open the door for anyone but police. Keep your phone. Keep calling 911. Tell them it's a break-in in progress, armed intruders. Armed? But they're not. Lie. It'll get you faster response. Okay. Her breathing was ragged. Thank you for answering. I'll get there as soon as the storm lets up. I promise. The line went dead. Marcus stood holding the receiver, fury and helplessness warring in his chest. Caldwell had escalated to violence, using the storm as cover. Those men weren't just searching Elena's workshop, they were destroying evidence. Thomas's copies of the historical documents. Research that could support Marcus's case. Even if Marcus had the originals, destroying Elena's copies would let Caldwell claim forgery. Marcus paced, mind racing through impossible options. He couldn't leave Lily. Couldn't cross the strait in this weather. Couldn't do anything except wait in rage. The pounding on the door made him spin, hand moving instinctively to a weapon he didn't have. He approached carefully, peered through a crack in the curtain. Frank Morrison stood on the porch, soaked to the skin, face pale. Marcus yanked the door open. Frank stumbled inside, water streaming from his clothes. "Thank God you're here. I heard about Elena on my scanner. Came as fast as I could." The scanner. Frank had mentioned being a volunteer firefighter decades ago. He'd still have emergency band radio. "How did you get across?" "Old reef passage only locals know. Dangerous even on calm days, but I've done it in worse." His breath came hard, labored. "I'm too old for this shit." Marcus grabbed a towel and thrust it at him. "Elena called me. Caldwell's men are at her workshop." "I know. I need you to stay with Lily. I have to go." The words came out before Marcus fully formed the plan, but once spoken, they became inevitable. Elena needed help. Sitting here safe while she faced violence alone was not an option. Frank looked at Lily sleeping by the fire, then back at Marcus. "You're going out in this?" "I don't have a choice." Frank's weathered face hardened with determination. "Then you need to know why Caldwell wants this island so badly. It's not just about resort development." Marcus waited. In the 1980s, a mineral survey company thought there might be oil or natural gas deposits under these waters. Caldwell's father invested millions buying mineral rights. Robert and Thomas proved it was a protected native site instead. The protection invalidated the mineral claims. Caldwell's father lost everything, literally went bankrupt. Richard's been trying to reclaim that loss ever since. He doesn't care about resorts. He wants to drill. Marcus felt the final piece click into place. So if he can discredit the protection, claim the documents are fake, he can revive those mineral claims. Exactly. And if he destroys Elena's copies and your originals, there's no proof the site was ever protected. He rewrites history. Lily stirred, her voice thick with sleep. "Dad?" Marcus went to her, knelt beside the bed. "Hey, baby, something's come up. I need to go help someone." Lily sat up, instantly alert despite her exhaustion. "The woman on the phone?" He nodded. "Her name is Elena. She's in trouble, and I'm the only one who can help right now." Terror flashed across Lily's face. "No, Dad, you can't go out in this. You'll die." The raw fear in her voice nearly broke his resolve. But he thought about Elena locked in her bathroom while men destroyed her life. He thought about David slipping through his grip, all the people he'd failed to save. Sometimes we have to do hard things for the right reasons. He cupped her face. "Frank will stay with you. You'll be safe. But what about you? I'm coming back. I promise." Lily grabbed his hand. "You better." She was crying now. "You better come back." Marcus kissed her forehead, memorizing the feel of it. He stood and pulled Frank aside. "The documents are in my backpack. If anything happens to me—" "Nothing's happening to you," Frank interrupted, "but I know what to do." He looked at Lily. "We'll hide them together. Make it a mission. Keep her busy." Marcus nodded gratefully. "There's a flare gun in the emergency kit. You remember how to use one? Navy doesn't forget." Marcus pulled on his still damp rain gear, found his heavy flashlight and the coil of rope. He was leaving weaponless into a situation that might require force, but he had surprise, training, and righteous fury. That would have to be enough. "Lily, he called. She ran to him and he held her tight. "I love you. Be brave." "I love you too, Daddy." The use of daddy instead of dad nearly undid him. She only said that when she was scared. He forced himself to let go, to turn away, to open the door into the storm. The wind nearly ripped the door from his hands. He fought out onto the porch and pulled it shut behind him. The world had gone mad. Rain drove sideways with enough force to sting exposed skin. The strait was barely visible through the deluge, a churning mass of white and gray. At the water's edge, Marcus found his small aluminum skiff being battered against the dock. Getting in was an act of controlled falling. The boat pitched violently, taking on water immediately. Marcus yanked the starter cord. The motor coughed, died. Second pull, same result. Third pull and the engine caught with a strangled roar. He pointed the bow toward the main island and opened the throttle. The crossing became a battle for survival. Waves hit from every direction, each one threatening to capsize the tiny boat. Marcus bailed with one hand while steering with the other, his body working on instinct and training. Water constantly in the boat, wind pushing him off course. The sound was overwhelming, engine screaming, wind howling, water roaring. His mind flashed to the night David died. Different ocean, but the same chaos. The same feeling of being utterly insignificant against nature's fury. The same terror of losing control. But Lily's voice echoed in memory. "You're coming back, Daddy." He couldn't fail her. Wouldn't fail Elena. This time he would hold on. The main island's dock appeared through the rain like salvation. Marcus cut the engine at the last second and let momentum carry him in. He grabbed the dock post, tied off with shaking hands, and scrambled onto solid ground. His legs nearly gave out. He ran through the storm toward Elena's workshop, following the route he'd walked before in sunshine that felt like a lifetime ago. The workshop's door stood open, light spilling out. Marcus approached carefully, scanning for threats. Voices inside. Male, rough, impatient. He peered through a window. Two men, both large, wearing dark rain gear. They were tearing through storage shelves, throwing tools and papers on the floor. One smashed a small sculpture against the wall, shattering clay fragments. Systematic destruction. Marcus tested the door. Unlocked. He stepped inside. "Who the hell are you?" The nearest man spun, face showing surprise then aggression. "I could ask you the same thing." The second man straightened, dropping the file drawer he'd been emptying. "Caldwell Properties hired us. Legal search for stolen documents. Breaking and entering isn't a legal search." The first man advanced, trying to use size as intimidation. "You should leave, buddy. This doesn't concern you." Marcus stood his ground, assessing angles and distances. Military training created a threat matrix in his head. Two opponents, both bigger, close quarters, favor grappling. His voice came out flat and cold. "Leave now, and I won't call the police." The second man pulled out his phone. "Already called our boss. He said to deal with any interference." The threat was explicit. Marcus saw the first man's weight shift, saw the decision being made. He prepared to move. Then a sound from the back room, a muffled cry. Elena, still locked in the bathroom. The first man moved to block Marcus's path. "I don't think so." Marcus didn't give him time to set his stance. He stepped inside the man's guard, grabbed the extended arm, and used a joint lock learned in hand-to-hand combat training. The man went down hard, crying out. The second man rushed forward. Marcus redirected his momentum, letting the man's own weight carry him into the heavy work table. He hit with a solid thud and slumped. Both men scrambled up, reassessing. Marcus grabbed a broken table leg, holding it like a weapon. "Try again and you'll need a hospital." They looked at each other, calculating. Whatever they were being paid wasn't worth this. The first man spat blood from a cut lip. "Caldwell will hear about this." "Good. Tell him I'm coming for him next." They left, stumbling into the storm. Marcus waited until their truck engine started and faded before moving to the bathroom door. "Elena, it's Marcus. They're gone." The lock clicked. The door opened slowly. Elena Barrett stood there, early 30s, dark-haired, disheveled, face streaked with mascara and tears. But her eyes burned with fury, not just fear. They destroyed everything. Her voice shook. Grandfather's workshop, his tools, his papers. Marcus surveyed the damage. Shelves emptied, drawers upended, Thomas's research files torn apart and scattered. The men had been thorough. Most of the historical documents Elena kept were gone, presumably taken. What were they looking for? Thomas's copies of the island protection papers? The archaeological surveys, everything that proves the island can't be developed. She looked at him with sudden fear. "Did they get yours too?" "No, they're safe." "Hidden," Marcus pulled out his phone. "We need to call the sheriff." "Good luck with that. Cell service is down." Storm took out the tower. He tried anyway. No signal. The landline? Dead too. They were on their own. Headlights swept through the window. Another vehicle approaching. Marcus tensed, but this one was different. Expensive. Powerful. Not a work truck. The SUV parked, and a woman emerged with an umbrella. Professional even in a storm. Victoria Simmons, Caldwell's attorney. She stepped into the workshop, taking in the destruction with practiced assessment. "Mr. Hayes, breaking and entering." "Assault. I have witnesses. Your witnesses were the ones breaking and entering. Marcus gestured to Elena. Elena Barrett, the owner of this property, is standing right here. Victoria ignored her completely. Where are the documents, Mr. Hayes? What documents? Don't play games. Thomas Barrett had copies of certain disputed historical records. Caldwell Properties has reason to believe they're forgeries created to prevent legitimate development. We're entitled to examine them. You're entitled to nothing. Get out. Victoria's mask of professionalism cracked slightly. You're making a very expensive mistake. By noon tomorrow, your island will be in county receivership. The protection claims will be invalidated, and you'll be defending yourself against criminal charges. Marcus stepped forward, using height to his advantage. Or by noon tomorrow, you and Caldwell will be defending yourselves against charges of bribery, evidence tampering, criminal conspiracy, and organized intimidation. Because I have proof of all of it. It was partly bluff. He had evidence of some of it, but not everything he claimed. Victoria's eyes narrowed, trying to read whether he was serious. What proof? Original territorial documents? County archive logs showing who tampered with filings? Photographs of your men here tonight? And witness testimony from every islander Caldwell has harassed for the last 20 years. Marcus kept his voice level, confident. I found what Robert and Thomas hid. All of it. And tomorrow morning, the county recorder, the State Historical Society, and the Seattle Times will all have copies. Victoria's expression shifted, the first crack in her certainty. You're bluffing. Try me. See you in court. She studied him for a long moment, calculating odds, weighing risks. Whatever she saw made her decision. She turned and left without another word, the umbrella snapping open as she stepped into the rain. Elena stared at Marcus. You're crazy. You know that? Maybe, but I'm also right. He looked at the destroyed workshop. Can you stay somewhere else tonight? Frank's place, if we can get there. The storm was lessening, still dangerous, but no longer apocalyptic. They could manage. Come on, we'll cross together. The journey back was brutal but possible. Elena followed Marcus to the dock where his skiff waited. They climbed in and Marcus started the engine. The crossing took 15 minutes of hard work, but the strait had calmed enough to be merely difficult instead of suicidal. When they reached Marcus's island, Frank was waiting on the porch, flare gun in hand. Relief flooded his face when he saw them. Thank God. Inside, Lily launched herself at Marcus. She wrapped her arms around him and didn't let go for a full minute. You came back. I promised I would. He held her tight, feeling her heart race against his chest. Some promises you keep no matter what. Frank helped Elena get warm and dry. Gunnar, who'd maintained his vigil by the door throughout Marcus's absence, finally relaxed when everyone was accounted for. He moved to the center of the room and lay down in a position where he could watch all of them. The guardian still on duty but satisfied his charges were safe. They sat together as the storm finally began to break. Frank made coffee. Elena wrapped in blankets on the couch, shaking from exhaustion and shock. Lily refused to leave Marcus's side. Gunnar's presence anchored them all, solid, patient, unwavering. Marcus looked around the cabin. When he'd arrived a week ago, this had been a prison. Now it held something that felt dangerously close to family. Not related by blood, but bound by struggle, by shared purpose, by the simple fact that they had all chosen to stand against Caldwell when giving up would have been easier. Tomorrow he would file the documents. Tomorrow Caldwell's schemes would end. Tomorrow the island would be protected forever. But tonight they were simply survivors huddled together while the storm spent its last fury against the trees. Elena spoke quietly. Thomas used to say the island tests everyone who lives here. Tests whether you are worthy of being its guardian. She looked at Marcus with new respect. I think you passed. Marcus thought about David, about all the tests he'd failed, about Lily's faith in him and Gunnar's loyalty, and Robert's trust in leaving this burden to a broken veteran who could barely trust himself. Maybe he had passed, or maybe he was finally learning that worthiness wasn't about never failing. It was about showing up anyway, about holding on when the storm tried to tear you loose, about keeping promises even when they seemed impossible. Outside, the wind died to a whisper. The rain softened. Through the window, the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky. The island had survived another assault. So had they. In a few hours, Marcus would cross to the mainland and end Caldwell's threat forever. But for this moment, he sat with his daughter's head on his shoulder, surrounded by people who'd become allies in a war he'd never meant to fight, and felt something he'd thought was lost forever. Peace, purpose, and the quiet certainty that sometimes the strongest bonds aren't forged in calm waters. They're hammered into shape by storms that either break you or make you unbreakable. The island had chosen its new guardian, and Marcus Hayes, broken veteran and part-time father, had proven himself worthy of the watch. Morning came with brutal clarity. The storm had scrubbed the sky clean, leaving it a hard blue that hurt to look at. Marcus stood on the porch watching the strait transform from gray chaos back into deceptively calm water. The sandbar had reemerged, glistening wet in early light. Lily appeared beside him, still wrapped in blankets. Today's the day. Today we end this. Inside, Frank was already making coffee, moving through Robert's kitchen with the ease of someone who'd done this countless times over 40 years. Elena sat at the table, her face drawn but determined. She'd slept fitfully on the couch, waking several times with startled gasps. The metal box sat on the table between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Everything depended on what happened in the next few hours. Marcus pulled out the documents and spread them carefully. We need copies, multiple sets, one for county records, one for State Historical Society, one for us. Claire at the Mercantile has a copier, Frank offered. Old but functional. Then that's our first stop. Marcus looked at Elena. You should come. Your testimony about the break-in is evidence. She nodded. I want to see his face when this falls apart. What about me? Lily's voice was small but fierce. Marcus knelt beside her. You're my secret weapon. Family court hearing is in 2 weeks. You being here, seeing me handle this, that's ammunition I need. Lily understood. She'd grown up too fast in a broken home. Learned to read between adult lines. I'll tell them you're the best dad. The simple declaration hit Marcus harder than any legal argument ever could. He pulled her close, breathing in the smell of wood smoke and child's shampoo. Thank you, baby. They crossed to the main island in 2 boats. Marcus and Lily in the skiff, Frank and Elena in Frank's larger fishing vessel. The water was still choppy from the storm's aftermath, but manageable. When they reached the dock, a small crowd had gathered. Word had spread the way it does in island communities. Some mysterious alchemy of scanner traffic in early morning phone calls. Claire stood at the front, her red hair bright in the morning sun. Half the town's behind you, she gestured to the dozen islanders assembled. We're done with Caldwell's bullying. Dan, the older man from the Mercantile, stepped forward. I'm coming to county with you. So is Mary. So are Jake and Susan and Tom. His weathered face was set with determination. Strength in numbers. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Not pain, but the opposite. Community. Support. Things he'd stopped believing existed. Thank you. At the Mercantile, Claire ran copy after copy, the old machine groaning but producing clean duplicates. Marcus organized them into folders with military precision. Original documents. Witness statements from islanders about Caldwell's harassment. Photographs of Elena's destroyed workshop taken on Frank's phone that morning. The case built itself into something irrefutable. The San Juan County Administrative Building stood on a hill overlooking Friday Harbor, a modest 2-story structure that housed recorder's office, clerk, and meeting spaces. Marcus's convoy arrived at 9:30, 2 trucks and a boat's worth of islanders determined to witness justice. Inside, the recorder's office was already occupied. Richard Caldwell stood at the counter, looking every bit the successful developer in expensive casual wear that probably cost more than Marcus's entire wardrobe. Victoria Simmons flanked him, her briefcase open, documents spread across the counter. The county clerk, a thin woman in her 50s named Margaret, was examining their papers with bureaucratic thoroughness. Caldwell looked up when Marcus entered. His expression shifted from confidence to irritation to something approaching fear when he saw the crowd behind him. Mr. Hayes, I wasn't expecting you this early. Caldwell's voice maintained its smoothness, but the edges frayed. I'm just filing the claim we discussed, clarifying some title issues. Marcus approached the counter and set down his folder. I'm here to contest that claim and file evidence that makes it moot. Margaret looked between them, clearly uncomfortable. Perhaps we should move to the conference room. This seems likely to take time. The conference room was cramped with everyone who'd insisted on witnessing. Caldwell and Victoria took one side of the long table. Marcus sat opposite with Frank and Elena beside him. The islanders lined the walls, a silent jury. Margaret spread her hands. Mr. Caldwell has filed a claim stating that the Hayes Island property has defective title dating to the 1885 land grant. He's requesting county receivership pending resolution. Mr. Hayes, you wish to contest? Marcus opened his folder. I have the original 1892 territorial survey showing the Barrett family's legitimate grant. I have the complete 1975 deed showing proper transfer from Thomas Barrett's family to Robert Hayes. Every signature, every witness, every legal requirement met. He slid them across to Margaret. These documents prove clear title. There is no defect, Victoria interjected smoothly. Those documents were removed from county archives improperly. Their authenticity is questionable. Marcus pulled out the next sheet. Here's the county archive log from 1998. It shows these documents were deliberately misfiled, moved from active records to dead storage by a clerk named Harold Simmons. He paused, looking at Victoria. Any relation? Victoria's face went blank. My father worked for the county for 30 years, and according to these bank records, Marcus produced another document, knowing he was stretching truth but betting she wouldn't call the bluff. He received several large cash deposits from Caldwell Properties in 1998, right before the documents disappeared. That's slander, Victoria snapped. It's documented fact. Marcus met her eyes. You can deny it, but 3 separate islanders have testimony about your father's relationship with Caldwell's father, about bribes and favors, about the mineral rights scheme that bankrupted the senior Caldwell. Caldwell himself stood abruptly. This is absurd. That was 30 years ago. Whatever my father did has nothing to do with... It has everything to do with this. Frank's gravelly voice cut through. You've spent 20 years trying to reclaim what your father lost. You don't care about resorts or development. You want to drill for oil and gas that probably doesn't even exist anymore. Marcus pulled out the final documents, the photographs from the 1880s showing Native American settlement, the territorial correspondence about protection, and most damning, the 2015 Washington State Historical Society certification. He slid them to Margaret. This island is a certified historical and cultural heritage site, protected under state and federal law. No development of any kind can occur without approval from multiple state agencies, approval that will never be granted given the archaeological significance. Margaret examined each document with increasing attention. Her bureaucratic neutrality cracked into something resembling shock. These are authentic state documents with proper seals. Forgeries, Victoria tried. The protection claim was never properly registered. Marcus pulled out one more paper. The county archive log showing the protection documents were filed correctly in 1998, then removed from public records by Harold Simmons. Same dates as the other tampering. The room went silent. Caldwell's face had gone from tan to gray. Victoria was furiously writing notes, looking for an angle that no longer existed. Margaret straightened. Based on this evidence, I'm denying Mr. Caldwell's title claim. The Hayes Island property has clear title and is furthermore protected as a heritage site. No receivership is warranted. Caldwell slammed his hand on the table. This isn't over. I have lawyers who will tear this apart. Actually, it is over. The new voice came from the doorway. A man in his 30s wearing jeans and a press badge entered. Jason Chen, Seattle Times. I've been covering Caldwell Properties' acquisition pattern in the San Juans for 6 months. His recorder was already running. Mr. Caldwell, would you care to comment on allegations that your company has used intimidation, false title claims, and destruction of evidence to force property sales? Caldwell's expression went from shock to rage to calculation in 3 seconds. No comment. He grabbed Victoria's arm. We're leaving. Before you go. Marcus stood, his voice carrying military authority that made everyone in the room straighten. Drop all claims to Hayes Island publicly, or every document I have here gets sent to the State Attorney General, the FBI, and every newspaper in Washington. Caldwell turned, his mask of civility completely gone. You think you've won? You're nobody, a washed-up veteran playing guardian of a worthless rock. That worthless rock is worth more than you'll ever understand. Marcus stepped closer, using height and bearing to full effect. It's history. It's culture. It's sacred ground. And you'll never touch it. The staring contest lasted 5 seconds. Caldwell broke first. Fine. You win your island, but don't expect any help from anyone in this region. I have connections that you've just burned. Claire's voice came from the wall of islanders. Every person in this room just heard you threaten a veteran. Every person here knows what you tried to do. Your reputation in the San Juans is finished. Caldwell looked at the crowd, hardened fishermen, shop owners, old families who'd lived on these islands for generations. He saw nothing but hostility and contempt. For the first time in his adult life, Richard Caldwell had no leverage, no angle, no way to win. He left without another word, Victoria hurrying after him. Through the window, Marcus watched them argue beside Caldwell's luxury SUV before climbing in and driving away. The vehicle's brake lights flashed red at the corner, then disappeared. The conference room erupted. Islanders clapped, cheered, shook Marcus's hand. Margaret stamped the documents officially, her earlier neutrality replaced with satisfaction. Even Jason Chen smiled as he packed his recorder. I'll need an interview later, the reporter said to Marcus. This is a bigger story than property disputes. It's about protecting indigenous heritage against corporate exploitation. Marcus nodded. Anytime. Outside, as the crowd dispersed with promises of celebration drinks at the local tavern, Lily grabbed Marcus's hand. You did it, Dad. You beat him. We did it. Marcus knelt beside her. You solved the map. Elena survived the attack. Frank provided crucial testimony. This wasn't one person winning, it was community. But you held everyone together. Lily's eyes shone with pride. Mom always said you couldn't handle responsibility. She was wrong. The words hit like absolution. Maybe I couldn't handle it before, but I'm learning. Elena approached, her face lighter than it had been since Marcus met her. Thank you for everything, for protecting grandfather's legacy. He protected it first. I just finished the job. She smiled. Thomas would have liked you. He and Robert both knew this day would come. They prepared you for it, even if you didn't know. Frank joined them, his expression carrying decades of relief. 40 years I watched them stand guard, watched them turn away developers and schemes and greedy men. Now I get to see the fight actually end. He extended his hand. Your grandfather would be proud. Marcus shook it, feeling the calloused grip of a man who'd built things with his hands for 7 decades. The honor's mine. The ferry horn sounded in the harbor, announcing the mid-morning departure. Marcus watched the large vessel maneuver away from the dock, carrying tourists and islanders to the mainland and back. Normal life, ordinary schedules. Things he'd forgotten existed. Come on, Dad. Lily tugged his hand. Let's go home. Home. The island wasn't a prison anymore or a sanctuary from the world. It was simply home. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Marcus hired a lawyer, one recommended by Claire, a young woman from Seattle who specialized in family law. Together, they built a case for revised custody that focused on stability, community integration, and demonstrated responsibility. The island itself became evidence. Marcus photographed the repaired cabin, the organized supplies, the safe environment. He documented his routine, fishing, maintenance work, the beginning of a business plan for eco-tours that would use the island's protected status as an educational opportunity. Frank helped him build a proper guest cabin for when Lily visited, hammering boards and laying shingles like he'd done half a century ago with Robert. Elena contributed a carved sign, Hayes Island Heritage Tours. Gunnar supervised, lying in the sun while humans did what humans did, build things that would outlast them. The family court hearing happened on a gray Tuesday in late November. Jennifer arrived with her lawyer, confident that 6 months of isolation would have made Marcus worse, not better. She argued instability, questioned his ability to provide proper schooling, suggested the PTSD made him unsuitable for primary care. Then Marcus's lawyer presented evidence. Photographs of the cabin, now winterized and comfortable, letters from islanders attesting to Marcus's character, Frank's testimony about employment with the tour business, Elena's statement about Marcus's courage during the storm. Most powerful was the psychological evaluation. The therapist Marcus had finally agreed to see noted improvement in PTSD symptoms, increased social engagement, and healthy coping mechanisms. Living on the island had done what years of urban therapy couldn't, given Marcus purpose and peace. The judge listened to everything, asked pointed questions, and finally made her ruling. Joint custody. Lily would split time equally, school year with Jennifer in Seattle, summers and alternating holidays with Marcus on the island. It wasn't everything Marcus wanted, but it was light years better than every other weekend. Outside the courthouse, Jennifer pulled him aside. Her expression was complex: anger, grudging respect, and something that might have been regret. You actually did it. Built a life. I'm trying. She won't have Wi-Fi or malls or any of the things normal teenagers want. She'll have trees and water and stars. She'll have a father who's present. Marcus met her eyes. And when she's with you, she'll have the city and school and her friends. We both give her what we can. Jennifer absorbed this, then nodded slowly. Don't screw it up. I won't. She left. Marcus stood on the courthouse steps, feeling winter rain on his face and something close to victory in his chest. Lily would be his for 3 full months next summer. They'd explore every corner of the island, learn its secrets, maybe start their own rituals in those rocking chairs. Christmas came quietly. Marcus spent it with Frank, Elena, and Claire, who closed the mercantile for the day and brought a turkey that barely fit in the cabin's small oven. They ate together, told stories about Robert and Thomas, and watched snow fall on the strait, a rare event that made the water look like hammered silver under white sky. Gunnar got a new collar, bright red with reflective stitching. He accepted it with dignity, then returned to his post. His afternoon vigils continued through winter, though the sandbar appeared less frequently with seasonal tides. On days when crossing was impossible, Gunnar would sit on the far shore, visible through binoculars, maintaining his watch from a distance. Elena suggested they place a marker at the lighthouse ruins, something permanent to honor the Barrett family's stewardship and the native peoples who'd lived there first. She worked through January designing it, a stone cairn with bronze plaque. In February, with Frank's help, they installed it. The plaque read, "This land remembers, honor its past, protect its future." Spring brought Lily for a week during her school break. They hiked every trail, fished from the dock, and started teaching her to pilot the skiff. She was fearless on the water in ways Marcus had never been. When they passed the spot where he'd nearly capsized during the storm, she noticed him tense. "You okay, Dad? Old ghosts?" She took his hand. "Maybe you should tell them goodbye." The idea had been growing in Marcus's mind for weeks. Unfinished business. David deserved more than nightmares and guilt. He deserved to be released. On Lily's last day before returning to Seattle, Marcus asked if she wanted to take a longer boat trip. They packed supplies and headed south, past the familiar islands into more open water. The coordinates Marcus had memorized 3 years ago led them to a spot that looked like every other spot in the Pacific. Gray-green water, distant mountains, nothing to mark it as special or cursed. But this was where David had died. Marcus cut the engine. The sudden silence felt profound. Lily watched him carefully, understanding this was important even if she didn't know all the details. "This is where I lost my friend." Marcus's throat tightened. "David Chen, best swim buddy I ever had. He died here because I couldn't hold on." "It wasn't your fault, Dad. Maybe not, but I've spent 3 years thinking it was." He looked at the water, forcing himself to see it as it was. Just water, cold and indifferent. Not malevolent, not hunting him, just existing. "David would want you to be happy." Lily's voice carried certainty beyond her years. "That's what friends do. They want you to live." Marcus pulled a small wooden box from his bag. Inside were David's dog tags, the ones Marcus had recovered from David's locker after the funeral, the ones he'd carried every day since. They'd become a talisman and a burden. He held them over the water. "David, I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I let go, but I can't carry you anymore. Not like this." He closed his eyes. "You gave me 3 years of brotherhood. Thank you. Rest easy." He dropped the tags. They hit the water with a small splash and disappeared. Gone. Not forgotten, but released. Lily hugged him. He held her and cried, deep wrenching sobs that came from a place he'd locked away since the accident. She didn't tell him to stop or that it was okay. She just held on while he grieved properly for the first time. When the tears finally stopped, Marcus felt lighter. The guilt wasn't gone. It would probably never be fully gone, but its weight had shifted. Bearable now. Manageable. They started the engine and headed back. The water that had haunted Marcus's nightmares was just water again. He could live beside it, work on it, maybe even trust it. Not all at once, but eventually. Summer arrived with shocking warmth. The San Juans transformed from gray and green to explosions of color. Wildflowers covering the meadows, eagles fishing the strait, whales passing through on their annual migration. Lily arrived in late June for her 3-month stay, her duffel bag packed with books and art supplies and the kind of excitement only a 10-year-old freed from school could muster. The island had transformed too. Marcus's tour business was modest but functional. He took small groups on educational hikes, showing them the lighthouse ruins, the native settlement sites, explaining the history and ecology with knowledge gained from months of study. Frank handled the boat portion, telling stories about the old days while piloting tourists around the archipelago. Elena's workshop had been rebuilt with help from the community, bigger and better than before. She'd shifted from delicate sculptures to large driftwood installations that she sold to galleries in Seattle and Portland. Her pieces carried titles like Guardian and Watching the Tide, obvious homages to Gunnar and the story that had saved them all. The cabin itself had expanded. With Frank's construction expertise and Marcus's labor, they'd added a proper bedroom for Lily, insulated the walls, installed a small solar panel system for lights. It was still rustic but comfortable. Home. On the anniversary of Robert's death, the community gathered for what Claire christened Island Heritage Day. They erected a historical marker at the dock telling the story of the Barrett family, Robert and Thomas's friendship, and the successful fight against development. Jason Chen's article in the Seattle Times had brought unexpected attention, positive attention about preservation, indigenous rights, and ordinary people standing up to corporate greed. The Historical Society sent representatives. A local native tribe performed a blessing ceremony honoring their ancestors who'd fished these waters for millennia. Elena gave a speech about her grandfather that had everyone in tears. Frank told stories about Robert building the cabin board by board. Marcus stood to the side, uncomfortable with attention, until Lily pulled him forward. "Say something, Dad." What could he say? That he'd come here broken and been remade? That this island had saved him when he couldn't save himself? That he'd found family in unexpected places and learned that loyalty outlasted death? He cleared his throat, facing the crowd of 50 or so people. "My grandfather wrote that the island tests everyone who lives here. Tests whether you're worthy of being its guardian." He paused, collecting thoughts. "I don't know if I'm worthy, but I know I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be. This place is more than property or history. It's a trust, and I promise to honor that trust the way Robert and Thomas did before me." The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Jason Chen scribbled notes. But Marcus only saw Lily's proud smile and Frank's approving nod. As evening fell, people dispersed to boats and trucks. Marcus and Lily walked back to the cabin, Gunnar trailing behind them. The old dog had slowed further over the months, his gray muzzle now almost white, his gait stiff with arthritis. But he still made his daily pilgrimage when the tide allowed, still kept his watch with absolute dedication. They reached the porch. 3 rocking chairs sat there now. Marcus had built a third with Frank's guidance, positioned slightly back from Robert's and Thomas's, a place for whoever needed it. Lily climbed into Thomas's chair, the one Gunnar guarded. The dog looked at her for a long moment, then did something remarkable. He climbed onto the porch, something he'd never done while on watch, and lay down directly between the 3 chairs. His head rested on his paws, but his eyes stayed open, watching all of them. His watch had changed, not abandoned, but expanded. He was still guarding, still loyal, but now he protected the living instead of mourning the dead. Marcus settled into Robert's chair. Lily rocked gently, her feet barely touching the porch boards. The strait stretched before them, catching the last rays of sunset and turning molten gold. In the distance, the evening ferry moved across the water, its wake cutting a white line through liquid metal. The ferry's horn sounded, a long, deep note that rolled across the water and up the island's slope. The sound vibrated through the porch boards, resonated in Marcus's chest. He tensed, old reflexes. The horn's pitch too close to other sounds. Winch straining, metal groaning, the moment before everything went wrong. His hands gripped the chair's arms, knuckles whitening. Lily noticed immediately. She reached across the space between chairs and took his hand. Her grip was small but firm. At the same moment, Gunnar lifted his head and pressed his muzzle against Marcus's other hand. Warm, solid, present. 2 points of contact, 2 anchors, 1 human, 1 animal. Both real, both here. Marcus's shoulders softened. He let out the breath he'd been holding, a long, slow exhale that carried 3 years of tension with it. The ferry horn faded into distance, leaving only the sound of wind through firs and water lapping at rocks. He wasn't on the cutter, wasn't watching David disappear, wasn't failing anyone. He was on a porch with his daughter and a loyal dog, watching sunset paint the world in colors that had existed long before his trauma and would exist long after. "I'm okay," he said quietly. "I know." Lily squeezed his hand. "But I'm here anyway. That's what makes me okay." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness crept across the water. Stars began appearing in the eastern sky, pinpricks of light that turned the strait into a mirror of the heavens. The Milky Way emerged, that river of stars invisible in cities, but overwhelming here in the island's darkness. "You know what's amazing?" Lily's voice was soft, almost dreamlike. "Those stars are the same ones Native Americans saw here hundreds of years ago. The same ones great-grandpa Robert and Thomas saw sitting in these chairs. Nothing's changed up there, but everything's changed down here." She smiled. The good kind of change, the kind that makes things better. Marcus thought about the year that had passed, coming here broken, finding purpose, fighting Caldwell, winning custody, learning to live beside the water that had taken his friend, building community. Becoming the father Lily deserved and the guardian Robert had trusted him to be. "Yeah," he agreed, "the good kind." Gunnar sighed, a long, contented sound. His tail thumped once against the porch boards. The rhythm matched the distant waves, steady, eternal, the heartbeat of the island itself. Tomorrow, tourists would arrive for morning tours. Elena would bring fresh bread she'd learned to bake. Frank would tell his stories. Life would continue in all its messy, complicated, beautiful normalcy. But tonight was for this. 3 figures on a porch, watching the world turn dark and the stars emerge. A man who'd learned that healing wasn't forgetting, but carrying loss differently. A girl who'd seen her father break and rebuild himself into someone stronger at the broken places. A dog whose loyalty had outlasted death and now protected new bonds as fiercely as he'd honored old ones. The strongest anchors in our lives aren't made of iron. Marcus thought the words but didn't speak them. They're made of small hands holding tight during storms, of old dogs who refuse to abandon their watch, of communities that stand together against those who destroy what they love, of second chances given by the land itself to those brave enough to accept them. He'd come to this island to prove to a judge he could be stable. He'd found something infinitely more valuable. Proof to himself that broken didn't mean unfixable. That purpose could be discovered in the most unlikely places. That family wasn't just blood, but shared struggle and mutual protection. The island had tested him, was still testing him every day, would probably test him for as long as he lived here. But he was no longer afraid of failing those tests. Because he'd learned the secret Robert and Thomas had understood during their 30 years of sitting on this porch, watching tides come and go. The test wasn't about never falling, it was about getting back up. About holding on when the current tried to sweep you away. About showing up every single day to do the work, tend the watch, honor the trust. And on the days when his grip faltered, when the memories became too heavy or the water too dark, he had anchors now. Real ones, strong ones. Lily's hand in his, Gunnar's steady presence, the island beneath his feet, the stars overhead bearing witness to the fact that loss could be survived, that purpose could be found, that a man could fail spectacularly and still become the guardian of something worth protecting. The ferry disappeared around the far island, its lights twinkling out one by one. The strait settled into its nighttime rhythms. Somewhere in the forest, an owl called. Closer, a seal surfaced with a soft splash. "Ready for bed?" Marcus asked. Lily yawned. "5 more minutes? Take your time." They rocked slowly in perfect rhythm while Gunnar kept watch over them both. Three souls on a porch at the edge of the world, held fast by bonds stronger than any storm could break. This was peace. This was home. This was the life Marcus had built from the ashes of the one that had burned. And it was more than enough.